Good evening. This is the July 21 meeting of the Harbor Management Commission. We have in attendance Jack Hirschler, Doug Metchick, Libby Tritchler, Harry French, Jeff Stedman, and Kim Taylor. Doug, you're new to the group. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a resident of Fairfield since 1996. A lifetime of maritime interests. I've run 2 boat builders. I was on a similar committee in Southwest Harbor, Maine when we were up there. I'm a member of Peacock Yacht Club, sailor, boater, fisherman. And this was my first, attempt at getting involved in the town. And so I became aware through Nancy Lefkowitz that maybe there was a need, and so I raised my hand, and here I am.
Great.
Good. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Jack, you want to introduce yourself just briefly?
Sure. I'm Jack Hirschler. I've been an alternate, and now starting last year, I became a full commissioner, a voting commissioner on the Harbor Management Commission, and I've been in Fairfield since 2000, and have a vote in Southport Harbor.
I'm Lindy Mckinney Tritchler. I'm born and raised, never left. I'm not going to tell you what year that was. I've been here my whole life. I'm an alternate on this committee, and I have a lot of family history in Peacock. I just live in Southport, and I love the town, and I wanted to be a part of something other than the political venue that my family took, so this was a perfect fit for me.
I'm Harry French. I own Henry C. Reed & Son Jewelers along with my son. We've been lifelong members of Fairfield, 70-some-odd years. We also have a boat in Southport Harbor.
And Mark Foster just entered. Mark, we're introducing ourselves to Doug, our new alternate. You want to give him just a short who you are?
I am what I am. Mark and I know each other.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff Stedman, I'm sorry. Jeff, you're sitting over there in the corner. You're an important part of this group.
I'm Jeff Stedman, and I just had the good fortune to be the commission staff since 1988. So that time goes fast. So that's when we were working on the harbor management plan, and I also work as a consultant and have for the conservation in Wharf Commission, committee, and the Shellfish Commission. So I guess my involvement is I have some background knowledge of what's taken place in the past and where it's operating in the future.
So this meeting is officially called to order. If there are members of the public who want to comment on our proceedings, they can do so by email. They can send an email to hmc@fairfieldct.org. In the subject line, put HMC 7/21/20 meeting. Give us your name and address, and your comments will be included with our minutes. Your email will not be listed. So our first order of business is approval of the minutes from our June 16 meeting. They were distributed to everyone. Anyone have any comments, concerns, questions? No? Can I have a motion to have them approved as written?
I'll make a motion.
Harry moves and Libby seconds it. All in favor? Everyone in favor. Great. Thank you. So the chairman's report. On June 18, July 8, July 14, And then as recently as this weekend, I've received several emails and pictures from our former commissioner, Cheryl Peacock, expressing concern about the kids who are jumping off the railings at Lower Wharf, jumping into the harbor just south of the Lower Wharf. And I've got some pictures were attached to the agenda. I've got some here.
They get germs.
What?
Those pictures have germs, no thanks.
Okay. Anybody else want to see?
I saw the electronic version.
You did see the electronic version. Okay.
I'm only kidding about the germs.
Okay. Thank you. So she has several times called the police. The police have come on a number of occasions. So we'll talk about that under old business in more detail. On June 22nd, we sent a letter to DEEP requesting a hearing to answer questions related to the Aquarian Water Company's application to DEEP for a permit for the diversion of water for consumptive use, including a diversion affecting the Hemlock Reservoir and the Mill River in Fairfield. And on June 22nd, we sent a letter to DEEP supporting Pequot's application for a certificate of permission for the ideal mooring floats. Not on this chairman's report is an email that I sent to Officer James Wiltsey of the Fairfield Police Department, the Marine Division, with pictures of the missing signs that Sam Cargill posted at the Lower Wharf over the course since our last meeting. Both of those signs, parenthetically, both of those signs disappeared within 24 hours of posting. And that was my email to Officer Wiltsey. He responded the next day thanking me for the email and saying that the Marine Police will be increasing their presence down there at the Lower Wharf. So that's good news. Ted, did you say something?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All righty. So that's the chairman's report. The harbor master's report. The harbor master is unable to be with us right about now. He's in Hartford trying to get home. He has been working on some administrative things with online mooring. He's received a couple of inquiries from folks who claim that they were erroneously taken off the wait list when we modified the wait list last spring. He has told them that if they have documentation showing that they in fact had sent in their renewal application to the former harbor master, that they should send that to us and that we would reassess to make sure that we haven't made any mistakes. He said, I spoke to him earlier today. He said, as of yet, he has not heard from the folks who have made the complaint. Ed is also working with Jeff Engborg at Pequot to ensure that the mooring tackle maintenance data get put into online moorings. So that's basically Ed's report. We have no new applications, so all the way down to old business, Lower Wharf. Jeff, do we have anything new there?
I spoke to the town engineer this afternoon. He knocked on his window. So the bid notice is...
Kim, it's difficult to hear anyone besides yourself.
The bid specification has been updated or revised to reflect the disposal site that we must use. And so the town engineer is looking at that now, and we'll be working with the purchasing agent next week and hopefully be able to put out the bid notice. This is a town dredging project between the yacht yard and the Lower Wharf in the area where the boat launching ramp is. And we have a state grant for doing this. And we don't have to give the money back, even though we haven't done it in the last 3 years. But we haven't been able to do it primarily because we don't have the material is I want to say contaminated. It's unsuitable for disposal without being capped with clean material from somewhere else. And the last 2 years, there's been no other project in Connecticut that's been approved that could be our cap. So that's what we're waiting on. And hopefully, as I said, that notice will go out shortly.
Okay. Did you hear that, Betty?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Sand management? Mr. Stedman.
Me too. The new members, this is probably what I believe one of our most important projects that we have to work with, and I'll talk about this in our presentation, but call this the sand shoal. Mm-hmm. And over many years, the east to west drift has moved it over top the jetty and almost halfway into the federal channel. There's a long history of dealing with this, trying to deal with this, and get the proper permits from the DEP to do this, because grasses that are growing on the top are listed as state-threatened species that have to be protected. And then, more than 7 years ago, a pair of endangered birds nested here, piping plover. So now we're working with the Corps of Engineers to, it's very, very interesting, to develop a plan, a dredging plan that would maintain the 100-foot width of the navigation channel as authorized. And the question there then is, if we cut into this so that we can restore a 100-foot wide channel, where will the side slope go relative to the plants that are on the top? So we've surveyed, we retained a botanist to stake the plants. The town engineering department surveyed the boundaries. The Corps of Engineers has put together a very interesting composite. They have a topographic analysis of the sandbar, also the depth of the channel, and they've overlaid on top of that the location of the grasses. So we're hoping in the next, I would say maybe by the next meeting, we'll have a proposed plan for dredging this area that we would then go to the DEP with to see if we can get permission to do that. And without going into a lot of stuff, it's interesting that years ago we thought that if we dredged the channel width, and we had the money to do it back in 2004, but the DEP would not allow us to restore the whole width of the channel, and since then it's continued over. So what the Corps of Engineers is saying is that the steepness of this slope has stabilized over time with the narrowness of the channel and the force of the river, that they think a fairly steep slope on the order of 3 to 1 is sustainable here. And if that's the case, then we can take a good bit of this sandbar out without disturbing the grass. But I'm going on because it's so interesting, but it's something that we're working on. And the goal would be to have this done with the Corps of Engineers' own dredge, which is a Hopper Dredge. And it's got hydraulic, like a vacuum cleaner. If we cut right through here, suck up the sand, and then we have an offshore spot not far offshore that the Bureau of Aquaculture has identified for us, where the hull of the boat splits, and we put the sand on the bottom and create a harder bottom than the mud bottom to see how oysters would grow in that area. So that's our goal. And to do this, we need money to do it, of course, and that's another issue. We hope that the state of Connecticut, although things are different now, but first is to get a plan that's approvable and a permit to do it.
Just curious, separate of the oyster initiative, would that sand be considered a suitable top for the dredge by the ramp?
No. Right? No.
You're right. Because the way the DEP has set up its program now, this sand is suitable for a beneficial purpose such as beach nourishment or habitat creation, but their policy is not to use sand material for cap of dredge material in Long Island Sound, because other dredge material that's not contaminated, that may be silty, that's what they want to see put in the Sound. They would not allow us to use this as cap material, and also there's not enough material for capping what we need to do. And who knows when we'd be able to do this? And if we were to use it as cap material, then we would have to excavate it and put it into barges and take it out there. It wouldn't be the quick way of the more efficient way, we think, of doing it with a hydraulic dredge. So I know I'm talking fast, but it's very interesting, and this has been a problem since the mid-1980s. And we've tried everything we can to, and the town has twice excavated sand from the side slope using a long-armed excavator, and then used that sand and trucked it along the beach out to Sasko Beach. The first time we used it to re-nourish Sasko Beach. The second time we took it, this was 2014, the second time, took it to other town beaches for beach nourishment. But it cost a significant amount of money to do that each time, to rent the equipment. And so anyway, we'll be talking about this more. It's very interesting.
Thanks, Jack. Other questions? Jack, Mooring Committee?
I don't really have anything to report beyond the Harbor Master report that you relayed, because the subject matter is exactly what we talked about at that meeting. So,
okay.
Betty, I have no other report.
Okay. So, Harbor Management Plan update. This is where we get to Jeff's presentation. I would just say that a group of us, just to put this in context, the plan is required to be updated every 10 years. It's never been updated. We currently, last year, we started, we got a grant from the Connecticut Port Authority that allowed so that we can afford to update the plan. And we started with some ideas and had a couple meetings, and then the virus hit. And so earlier this week, Jeff and Jack and I met as the plan update committee, and we decided that it's high time for us to get organized and to get going, and that the first step to continue on with the efforts that we made a year ago would be for Jeff to present to everyone what the plan is, where it comes from, and as well as what some of the major emphasis of a new plan could be, should be, would be possible. So Jeff's presentation will give us the basic outlines of what we've got and hopefully from all of us where we need to go.
I might just say, Kim, that there isn't a requirement that it needs to be updated every 10 years. That's not in the statute.
Oh,
The Plan of Conservation and Development is supposed to be updated every 10 years, but there is no similar requirement for the Harbor Management Plan. Although
Get one more over here.
Oh, I don't know where I got that. I thought the 10 years was in the plan. I'm wrong.
There may be a goal in the plan, but there's no
Okay.
requirement.
Okay.
So I think what we can say is that even though the plan 95, 2000, 25 years, many of the recommendations have been achieved, but the policies and the goals are still, by and large, applicable and good. So our job, I think, is to update the plan, set new priorities, and make clear the things that we have accomplished since it was adopted and approved. So we put together this presentation. It's on the website. We're hoping that we would be able to do it electronically, but it's not just for the commission. It would be we originally intended that we would have a public meeting, and we would talk about our goals for updating the plan and get input from the public, and we would give this presentation. So I don't want to talk too much, but I'll start.
Can you mind just repeat, when was this plan originally drafted?
The plan was approved by the state of Connecticut and adopted by the RTM in 1995. And for those, some of you know, it took us 10 years to do it. And it was an extremely, in some instances, contentious process. That's a mild term. But we were able to do it. And I'll mention this, but there was significantly significant voices in opposition at the time. And some of those voices were arguing that this was somehow going to increase the state of Connecticut's involvement in Southport Harbor. And we made the argument then, and it's been proven since, the opposite has been the case. The purpose of the harbor management legislation was to increase municipal authority and, in effect, strengthen home rule. And since the plan was adopted, it addressed the issues that, so I'll tell you a little bit about what started the whole thing. But I think no one can make the argument that was originally made that this plan was not in the benefit of the town of Fairfield. So the going through this presentation, which will, as I said, is on the town website. And, I know, speed me up if I'm taking too long. But that's the second slide, the town of Fairfield in southwest Connecticut. I mean, we know where we are, but significance of this, too, is that it's part of the coastal area of the state of Connecticut. So there's a legislation called the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, and that imposes certain coastal management policies that have to be followed. And mostly those policies have to do with land use decisions, things that affect the water that take place in the coastal boundary. But it's a significant institutional consideration is the Coastal Management Act. The next slide, it says Southport Harbor at the top. And I'm saying this because in case there's anybody on the phone that's looking at this presentation on the town website at the same time we're talking. And then, of course, within the town is Southport Harbor, a district of the neighborhood of the town. And the 1986 date at the bottom of that first slide is when the Harbor Management Commission was established. And it was established by the town code, and it was given certain authorities and responsibilities, including the responsibility to utilize or implement all of the state authorized powers and duties given to a municipal harbor management commission. So 1986 is when the commission was established, and in a minute I'll get into the actual reason why. The next slide, it says historic coast. This to me is one of the most interesting aspects of Southport Harbor is the history of the maritime improvements and the development of actually the port of Southport in the late 1700s, 1800s. And if you look at that image, it's pretty good on the computer screen. That was from a survey on the left side that was drawn, or it was done in 1826, which is the first, as far as we know, survey of the harbor. And it was in anticipation of federal navigation improvements. So if you look at that drawing, you see the significant marsh area on the east side of the harbor. You see the barrier beach that's still there. So the navigation improvements that would be later authorized, and of course at that time they also realized that sand was drifting from east to west, and it was going into the mouth of the harbor. So this survey was drawn in 1827. It was done in 1826 by the U.S. Topographical Engineers, which was part of the Department of the Army. And that little drawing on the lower right, sorry to go into this, it's sort of interesting. You can see the logs that they put in vertically. That was the local people's first effort at trying to, I mean, this is an artist's rendition, of course, but that was the first effort locally, before the federal government got involved, to try to block the sand that was moving over that area. Historic maritime community, it's part of a national, local, and state historic district. And that, I think, is one of the basic goals of the Harbor Management Commission and plan, too, is to not only guide safe and beneficial use, but to protect the harbor's natural environment and the historic character of the harbor. The next slide, it says Federal Navigation Project, which I think is very interesting. And I made a mistake on this. I said that the Federal Navigation Project was first authorized by Congress in 1825. I got a book from the Corps of Engineers that lists all of the navigation projects in Connecticut and also a spreadsheet that lists all in New England. And on the spreadsheet and in the book, it says 1829 as the first authorized date. But I thought I was smarter than that because I had the Congressional Act that authorized 3 beacons in 1825. All right, so the beacons, one was here at the end of where the jetty would be built, and the other is still out here. But those actually don't count as a federal navigation project because they're not maintained by the Department of the Army. So I have to correct that. But it's still, but also on that list, it's interesting that the only 2 other navigation projects older than Southport in Connecticut are in the Saugatuck River in Westport. I don't know what that is for. And Stonington Park. Then 1829 is Southport. And if you look at all of New England, look at how many projects there are in New England. Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. There's only 2 or 3 others in New England that are older than 1829. One is Kennebunk Harbor in Maine, and there's another one in Massachusetts. The point is it goes back a long time. And the navigation improvements that were first authorized and built were the jetty at the sandbar and the wall along the east side of the harbor. And the purpose was to sort of self-evident, to block sand from continuing to go over into the navigation channel, but also to what they called train the river, the flow of the Mill River, into the main part of the harbor instead of spreading out into the wetlands that were here, the golf course wasn't there in the 1820s. And then subsequent to that were the authorizations of the navigation channels themselves. And it's a long, interesting history. And in some of the old reports, they talk about how the initial dredging projects were done by oxen pulling scrapers at full tide. I don't know how they're able to do that, but those are in the federal report. So anyway, the navigation project is quite interesting because the Corps of Engineers has a policy that federal navigation projects, because they're maintained with public money, have to be open to all on equal terms. It means you can't restrict the use of the navigation project if there's a federal anchorage. You can't restrict its use to just town residents or yacht club members, and that gets into the reason why we did this in the first place. So anyway, to go through the slides, and the next one is a Center of Recreational Boating, which Southport is now. The sail training programs are important, sailing power boats. The next slide, and again, some of this is for the public, to hopefully get them interested and able to ask questions and make suggestions. The points of public access are pretty clear. And there's really 3 main points. The town boatyard, also known as the yacht yard, the lower wharf, which we'll get into that a little while. The Harbor Commission is responsible for managing the lower wharf. That's one of and part of that comes from the Harbor Management Commission provided a substantial sum of money, $50,000, that went towards the purchase of the lower wharf when it was purchased from the private owner. And Perry Green provides access. And the town landing is part of the town boatyard. That's a requirement for the federal navigation project, that the town will provide a public landing for people using the navigation project. And then the next slide, the heading is Harbor Management Plan. And I sort of chuckled before when I looked this last sentence that we wrote on this slide. The plan resolves conflicts and regulatory issues concerning use of the federal navigation project, ensured the project's future maintenance, and made clear the Harbor Management Commission's oversight authority. That doesn't quite tell you all that happened in 10 years. and the numerous meetings and drafts and difficulties. But to make a long story short, and I think, I'm not trying to, but the reason why this is important, I have a friend that I had at the Corps of Engineers who was involved in this at the initial problems were identified, and he told me that, and he was there for 40 years, that he found that after 25 or 30 years, that problems that they saw in local harbors or in other places came back. They thought that they had been resolved, but they came back because either the institutional knowledge was lost or the people that were originally involved in the solution to the problem were no longer being involved in the management of the harbor. And so I always thought that was quite a perceptive comment. But what happened, I can say this quickly, in the 1980s, mid-1980s, the Corps of Engineers received what they describe now politely as an inquiry about how the harbor was managed. It was also at this time in the 1980s that the Corps of Engineers was giving attention for the first time in a while to how they could better enforce their policies and their regulations. And the dredging projects throughout New England, I sound like a know-it-all, but I'm friends with these guys and they've talked about this for a long time. The dredging projects throughout New England were sort of, the Corps wanted to do them, the local congressman would call and say, can you dredge the harbor? And the Corps would want to do that. There was more money available. And it was a way of doing something for the congressman and sort of thinking about this. And then they would get some consideration when the big funding bills were passed. But over time they found that, especially in these small harbors in New England, there were encroachments. People built docks out into the harbor or into the channel. Or people excluded people from using the anchorage if it wasn't a local person. And I'd like to say that the harbor management program in Connecticut started in 1980 when the Corps of Engineers came to dredge in Norwalk Harbor. And they went into East Norwalk and they found that people along the shoreline had built docks out into the channel with the dredging operation. And I guess it sort of became clear that the surveys that they did at that time didn't always identify the encroachments for whatever reason. So the Corps at that time they were working with the U.S. attorneys in the different districts, and they started to develop a way of, when people did this, they would do something, they would take some action against them. In Norwalk, they sent letters saying you're subject to fines and penalties if you don't do something. And as a result of that, there was a guy at the Corps who came up with the idea, the Corps of Engineers, came up with the idea of harbor management commissions in Connecticut. And his idea was that if there were municipal commissions that were responsible for being concerned about these things, then maybe they could be headed off before you had to involve the legal system. And so he worked with a fellow named George Gunther, who was a state senator from Stratford. And harbor management legislation was passed in 1984, which authorized municipalities to have harbor management commissions, and the intent was clearly to increase local involvement and authority. And that was opportune because it was about that time that the issues in Southport Harbor, the Corps received the inquiry about how Southport Harbor was managed. And the town had essentially drawn an imaginary line halfway through up the harbor called the Sullivan Line. And the town had said to the Pequot Yacht Club, you manage north of the Sullivan Line and the town will manage to the south of it. And of course, to the north of the Sullivan Line was also Federal Channel and the Federal Anchorage. And so it wasn't the proper way to manage a federal navigation project. So that led to years of conflict to how do we address this problem, maintaining the viability of the yacht club, because the yacht club is clearly an important water-dependent use. I don't want to probably talking too much, but it was resolved after some years. And Harris Russell, who was the first chairman of the Harbor Commission, or maybe second chairman, maybe Jerry Malafron was first, and Pat Carroll, who was harbor master at the time, we went to Waltham and we met with the Corps of Engineers to try to work out a solution after years of difficulty. And the solution is fairly simple. Oh, and also the yacht club had built docks that extended into what was at that time the federal channel. So interestingly, back in the 1980s, this area here was not an anchorage. It was formally designated as a federal channel. The channel came up, and then this was a federal anchorage. So the solution, the basic solution to all of this was that we would defederalize this, what had been the federal anchorage. Defederalize that, which would allow the yacht club to apply for a permit to maintain its own mooring field here. In exchange, the yacht club would agree to provide boating services to the general public and to assist the Harbor Commission with managing the harbor in the public interest. That was worked out in a memorandum of agreement that continues unless it's voided. And this area here, which had been channel, so you can't have boats moored in a channel. So this was changed. Designation of this was changed to an anchorage, and to allow boats to be there. But the access to moorings had to be open to all, from regardless of town of residence. So we were allowed to grandfather. There were yacht club members who had boats in here that the yacht club controlled the moorings. But those people could stay. But if they left, the moorings weren't reserved for the use of other yacht club members. They would go to the next person on the waiting list, and we made one waiting list. And at the same time, although the yacht club had built its docks encroaching into what had been the channel, we shifted the boundary of this channel away from the shoreline a bit of a distance, so the yacht club could apply to authorize their docks after the fact. And this was all done. This was done in the harbor management plan. That was the layout of the plan. And the understanding was that if we did this, if we solved that, if we opened it up to all, equal terms, the Corps would dredge the harbor, which in effect they did. So the plan was 1995. I believe in 1996 we worked with the congressional delegation, which was a big to-do in itself, to amend the federal law that authorized this in the first place. It required a new congressional act. And then once that happened, the Corps went ahead with planning to dredge the harbor. And even though that this is not, I'm saying there's not a national interest in here, there's no commerce, at that time, there was something called congressional earmarks. So the congressman could add to a funding bill a project in their district, and people did that to all get something. And so the money was authorized, and this was dredged. The whole part of the harbor, the main harbor, was dredged, all of it, the channel in 2004. So that was a clear benefit of the harbor management plan. And we were also able to charge a fee for moorings, and that fee still has to go into a dedicated fund that can only be used for improvement of the harbor and for expenses of the commission. And it was from that fund that the $50,000 was provided to help purchase the lower wharves. So I'm going on a lot about this, but it was a significant effort, and I think that we can say that it's been beneficial ever since. And the yacht club has been sort of unique, I think, in Connecticut too, a partner with the commission and with the harbor master in managing the operation of the harbor. And the yacht club maintains and inspects the moorings, but does it at cost. They don't charge a profit, and that's all part of the resolution of this. Now, I'd also mention the yacht club also, though, had to pay a substantial fine to the U.S. attorney. I forgot to tell you, was involved in this. The assistant U.S. attorney came to some of the harbor commission meetings, so it was a big to do. But one thing I'm trying to do, and I think you'll find this interesting. Back then, for some reason, I cut out newspaper clippings of all of the meetings and the public meetings, and I'm putting together a book that shows the progression of doing this over time, which hopefully I'll have that by the next meeting.
Oh, Jeff, the U.S. Attorney's issue was about the club encroaching in the federal channel, I guess, at that point?
Yeah, but it's both. It was also utilizing the federal anchorage for its own
Private
purposes and encroaching into what had been the channel.
Okay.
And so that's the reason why the Harbor Management Commission was established, to deal with this problem locally once the State Harbor Management Act was passed, authorizing municipalities to address these problems. So to work this out locally rather than have the federal government say, get out and pay the fine. But anyway, I'm going on too much about that maybe, but it's very, very interesting. The next slide, we put together this slide showing the number of towns in Connecticut with harbor management plans. And I think there's 26 plans altogether throughout the state. But all of these towns, you know, they established the commissions for the purpose of managing their own resources. The next slide on harbor management authorities. As I mentioned, it was the 1984 act of the legislature establishing the harbor management authorities for municipal government, and then the 1986 adoption of the ordinance establishing the Harbor Management Commission, the town code. The other important, I guess, institutional or implementing authorities that's part of managing Southport Harbor is the authority of the harbor master. I don't know if Ed is listening, but the harbor master is appointed by the governor, and with a harbor management plan, the governor has to appoint the harbor master from a list of at least 3 people provided by the Harbor Management Commission, and the harbor master has substantial authorities to station vessels and also pursue public safety. Now, the harbor master must conduct his or her activities consistent with the harbor management plan. So that's how the mooring rules and procedures were developed. The harbor master is guided by those. And over the years, I've been fortunate. When I started, the harbor master was a fellow named Claude Johnson, and then Pat Carroll was harbor master for many years, and Lou Schuler, and now Ed Billings. So I've been very fortunate to have people as harbor master in Southport with the most, with unquestioned integrity and interest in the community. Other towns have some issues in that regard. The jurisdiction, the harbor management jurisdiction, this slide is better on the website, of course, where it's in color. But the jurisdiction is limited to Southport, Inner and Outer Harbor, and Sasko Brook. And there's been questions about, well, why doesn't it include all of the town's waters? And I can't explain that other than that the reason was to deal with the issues in Southport Harbor, and so the jurisdiction was drawn accordingly.
I was surprised when I saw this earlier that the eastward boundary is that red 22 buoy.
Yeah.
I had no idea that our responsibility actually goes as far out in the east and offshore.
But over time, over the last number of years, there have been suggestions at times that the Commission should consider expanding its jurisdiction to be able to apply the harbor management authorities in other areas of the town. And I think it's something that we want to at least leave open the possibility for doing in the update of the harbor management plan. Now, who drew this boundary? I don't know, because it's in the town code. It was in there from 1986. I don't know. Maybe Jim Bradley might know this, but I've tried to figure out who drew that. And the boundary between the inner and outer harbor is the end of the jetty, and the inner harbor goes up to the Tide Mill Dam. And the next slide just talks about that.
So that swimming conversation we had at the beginning of the meeting relates to the town code talks about no swimming in the inner harbor. So from the point of the outer edge of the jetty inward to the north, it's all no swimming. Okay.
Yes. Harbor management area. Then I said that the plan, in many respects, not in most respects, is still valid because the goals and objectives and the policies are basic policies to protect the environment and to maintain safe navigation, maintain reasonable public access, encourage coordination. So those basic goals are still applicable. You might want to fine-tune them. And then the next slides, we talk about public safety, which is something that the harbor master and the yacht club contributes to this too. You're aware every year there's an emergency drill at the yacht club with police and fire and the ambulance service, and the harbor master's involved. Public safety, of course, is one goal. If I go to the next slide, the moorings. I mentioned this because the commission establishes the fee for the annual permit, also establishes the annual mooring maintenance charge, which is just to recover. It's not to make money, because we can't make money off the federal anchorage, but we can recover costs, and then those costs have to go back into the management of the harbor. The harbor master has to issue the permits, maintains the waiting list, and all the fees go into the harbor management account. Now, the North Anchorage, I jumped ahead of myself by saying how we defederalize that, and that's the area that the yacht club has permits from the Corps of Engineers and from the DEEP for its own mooring field. It's still subject to permits from the harbor master, but the yacht club controls who goes on the moorings. It's not subject to the overall waiting list. The yacht club has dredged that, I believe, at least twice since that designation was made. And then the next slide, mooring maintenance. That's interesting too, because example, get off the track. When we were doing the plan, the Shellfish Commission was quite involved in it, in making comments. And they had originally asked for every year to take out all the moorings in case we want to have someone come in and, harvest the bottom for shellfish or plant shellfish. And we made an agreement that we would do a third every year. And that's the maintenance schedule. So, and the Shellfish Commission, I don't believe, except maybe a few times, has come in to harvest shellfish. They did before the harbor was dredged in 2004. And I mentioned the next slide, boating services for the public. That's part of the agreement with the harbor management plan and the agreement with the yacht club that in exchange for, well, as I mentioned, defederalizing the Anchorage, the yacht club would provide boating services to the public. And I think that's, as I said, a unique agreement throughout Connecticut. The next one is interesting, harbor management consistency review. And I'm going to show us a photo here. So every project that affects the harbor has to be referred to the Harbor Commission for review and comment. So if it's a permit application for a dock or a seawall, we don't have a whole lot of them. That's an application for a state DEP permit. It has to be provided to the Harbor Commission for review and comment. And if it's a land use matter, it has to be referred by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. And that's part of the Harbor Management Plan and the Harbor Management Statutes. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Exide project. All right, so here's harbor going down here. It's outside of Southport Harbor. It's north of the Tide Mill Dam. So I don't know when it was, 2012 or whenever this started. There was a meet, and I think this is one of the biggest accomplishments that the Harbor Commission has had over the years in Fairfield. When the Exide project was first made known to the town, the project to dredge the lead-contaminated sediment, there was a meeting in the high school, and the attorney for Exide said they don't need any town approvals. And chairman stood up at the commission at the time. Well, actually, I did first, and I was, but the chairman had a lot more, I guess, presence. And she said that that's not correct, because your project affects the harbor. So the statute says any project that affects the real property on and or contiguous to the harbor is subject to our review. Now, the plan did doesn't say about how the Exide project should be done, but it has policies and goals for protecting water quality and fish and wildlife resources and the quality of life in the neighborhoods along the harbor. So using that authority, that led to almost a year, better part of a year of facilitated meetings with the Exide group, with DEP, other town agencies, Shellfish, Conservation, and then there was a Fair Plan group was involved too. But it ultimately led, I believe, to a much better project than would have been done if there was no town involvement. You can see, well, without going into it, this is what they did. They dredged from the different parts of the river. They pumped the contaminated sediment into these bags on the property. The bags dewatered. It went through a treatment plant. The treated water went back into the river. When all this dried up, they cut up the bags and they took it away. But that was an example of this harbor management consistency review. And I believe that the Harbor Commission's role in this was very substantial. In the dredging, that's part of the ongoing the ongoing tasks that we have to pursue. And as I said, 2004, and then was when the Corps of Engineers dredged. In 2004 and 2014, DPW also excavated sand. And I get a kick of the next slide. I found this cartoon. And don't ask me where I found it, because I don't know. Someplace it was in a file that I had, but it's got the date on it, and it's from the Fairfield News. And it says, please, Uncle, can you dredge out in 1926? And in 1925, if you look at I look at the federal documents, the federal government proposed to essentially abandon the navigation project in Southport because there was no longer a commercial port in operation. But they reauthorized it, and I believe it was in the 1930s, I have the date, as a project specifically to serve pleasure boating, recreational boats. Still a federal project. And then, another part of the harbor management interests and benefits are the special events that take place. And we didn't have the blessing of the fleet or the parade this year, unfortunately, but hopefully next year. And then the plan also sets out authorities for implementation. Who does, what's the role of the Harbor Commission, which isn't going to change. Role of the Harbor Master, that's sort of set. RTM adopts.
Can you stand closer to the phone so people have trouble hearing?
Okay. The RTM adopts ordinances. State and federal agencies have a role, and then private groups, such as the Sasquatch Group and the Southport Conservancy. And the summary of the benefits of the plan. And again, when this was proposed initially, there was significant voices in opposition, and I would say without any hesitation that all of those concerns back then were unfounded, or maybe they thought they were founded at the time, but haven't been realized. And so the main goal was to strengthen the town's role for managing this, and also to provide. We can have regular meetings again for the public to come in and express their concerns. And the next slide, I think this is something that's been of interest lately. There's a state statute that essentially says that a recommendation of the Harbor Management Commission, pursuant to and supported by the policies of the plan, is binding on a decision by a state official. And then it goes on to say, unless the official can show cause otherwise. But that's the principal authority that we and that's one of the authorities that we used when we were involved with the Exide project. So I don't think it can be argued that the plan hasn't strengthened home rule. And sorry it's going on so long, but there's a few other things. Harbor management priorities in 2020. So we put down 4 of them. First being to update the harbor management plan. And one of the key elements of that update is going to be the long-term plan for restoring the channel through the sandbars. And so we're making, I think, good progress now with the Corps of Engineers to design what that plan will consist of. I have it. So that plan is what do we do with the sand? I think we know. And how do we protect the grass? Whether we're going to have to transplant some of that grass or remove some invasive plants here and let the grass colonize it. But that's going to be a main part of the updated harbor management plan. And then the other, and then part of that, not just having a plan for it, but is to actually dredge. Is actually to accomplish the dredging. And then we also have the third priority is to accomplish the dredging in here, not the dredging through, in addition to the dredging through the sand shoal, but is to dredge that area of the lower wharf, which would also allow us to put in, I think if there's 2 additional planks, well, 1 additional plank that has to be put in, of the boat launching plank, which requires us to dredge closer to the area. And then that would also, the last plank that's there now, we could reposition that to make a better angle. But that's another priority to complete that project. And then the fourth priority, we've already done part of it, which is to implement and get in place the online mooring system, but to make sure it's fine-tuned and running properly. And then along with that is to update the mooring rules and procedures, which are essentially regulations, which the town code and the RTM has given the commission the authority to do on its own. Don't have to go back to the RTM to get approval for the mooring rules and procedures. You have to hold a public hearing and publish in the newspaper, but we don't need to have another approval by the RTM. So the next few slides were just to add what I've just said about updating the plan, the channel dredging project, and then the next slide says sand management. It's sort of interesting. If you look at comparison between 1934 and 2018. Now, in 1934, you notice that there's some deeper areas to the east of the end of the jetty. But those areas those are the areas where sand was dredged in part to fill in the country club in the early part of the 1900s. So one of the concerns is that those areas are filling in, which allows the sand that's moving in the littoral zone is not sticking in those areas, but moving farther to the west. And so one of the thoughts. This is a good shot too. But one of the things that I think we have to think about is if we're able to dredge this area through here with the Corps of Engineers, should we not think about doing something on the east side of the jetty to try to reduce the volume of sand that's currently being washed over? And it's being washed over primarily. For some years, a while ago, we put snow fencing up here. But we found that the wind-blown movement of sand wasn't the principal movement. It was high water and waves washing it over, and then waves bringing it up here. So should we be thinking about doing something on this, essentially managing the jetty, moving as sand builds up against the wall that blocks it? Should we be thinking about moving it on the beach to the east and working with the country club to accomplish that? And when I talked with the Corps of Engineers recently about their planning for restoring the 100-foot wide channel, they said that their task, or their scope, or what they're working on, is maintenance dredging. If we want to propose something, a maintenance of the jetty, we can develop that on our own. But they're not planning that for us now. So that's why we're keep using the term sand management. How do we use that sand, keep it out of the channel, and also use it beneficially. The Lower Wharf Improvement Project, we talked about that. Mooring administration, and that's a key part of what we're doing. 116 permits, I believe, so far this year, and 57 names on the waiting list, which is quite almost half of what it had been in previous years. we've realized that many of the people on the waiting list in previous years apparently didn't have boats or what weren't interested in. But so that's been adjusted. And now this slide that says public comments and suggestions. We had anticipated having a public in a larger room where we could go over this and then ask people what they think or what they think we have to address in the harbor. As an alternative, we're thinking, the committee, to putting together a questionnaire or a survey that we could then announce and put on the town website. Because we want input not just from the mooring permit holders, but from other people who enjoy the harbor too. So I think if it's agreeable to the commission, that would be our next step, is to draft some survey questions. Because I think the last thing we want to do is to update the plan and tell people, here it is, this is what we did. What do you think? We want to make sure people have a chance to provide input at the outset. That's my long-winded presentation.
That's great. Questions?
It's very thorough.
Good.
I really think that over the time, that with the accomplishments of the Harbor Commission, we've talked about, issues with the mooring list and the mooring permits, but compared to other towns, I don't like this word sophistication, but the level of interest and detail that the Harbor Commission has demonstrated over the years is really exceptional. Use the Excite project again, but just the day-to-day management of moorings, being able to acquire that lower wharf property, through the Harbor Dredge, and to establish and maintain that partnership with the club, with the yacht club, the commission, and the harbor master, but at the same time realizing that we have to comply with that open to all on equal terms policy, and that, I think that's what we hope to maintain, and
Well, it's complicated and it's complex for sure, and you've simplified it and made it much, much clearer for all of us. Really, really well done. Well, I guess the next step is to say, who wants to volunteer to be on the committee to update the plan? Because that's kind of where we are. We've got to start, but we need to get the public's involvement, because that's essential to find all the users. And the surveys are not, what we came up with, but not necessarily the only solution. If other folks have some ideas, and we sure could use some manpower on the committee.
I think the plan is that Jeff will do a lot of the writing itself. You wrote the bulk of the original plan, so this is really about input and feedback and editing, rather than, if you were imagining having to write it, it's not really the job. It's really assisting Jeff.
Maybe the first task is to put our heads together to figure out what sort of questions we want to ask of the public that will help us.
Kind of like a survey.
Right,
survey, yes.
right.
A public survey.
Right.
About Southport Harbor. And
right.
It goes along with the presentation was meant to also sort of an outreach from the commission too, to help, again, educate or inform people what we're doing. But I think we should work on the survey first.
You made the point also that what we put into the plan gives us authority if things come up in the future. If we don't put them in the plan, we have no authority. So we have to be sort of anticipating what could happen in the next 25 years that we wish we had more control over by having put in the plan.
We have to hopefully reach agreement with the DEEP about maintaining the 100-foot channel. And if we can reach that agreement and put that in the plan, then that's what would be permitted in the future.
I would agree.
So no takers?
I'd like to stay involved in spite of that I missed your last meeting.
Okay, great.
Is the committee already formed? And
Well,
how many people are on?
We had a committee last fall, but we had at least one person who, our former chair was on the committee, and he is no longer with us. So we're now down to 3 plus Jeff. So
I'm happy to raise my hand.
That's great.
Understanding I'm a newcomer and only know what I know.
Well, again, I think what Mark and what Jack and Jeff have said is that we've got an outline. We don't need people who are going to sit down and write. We need people who use the harbor in a variety of ways to get their input. And it's not necessary that you know all the specific ins and outs, but what are you thinking about in terms of who do you know that uses the harbor, and how can we get to them? And then what do we do with that information once we've gotten it? I mean, Jeff's provided us with draft surveys of that have been used in New London and West Haven, and with questions. So we may not even have to. We may be able to just call good questions.
Have all the information already there.
Yeah, we just
pieces and just
right.
Combine it for our own.
Right.
It's just basic logistics of a survey on the town website and how do we promote it.
I think the survey itself is probably the easy part. How
Right.
is that communicated?
Right.
And have access to it, and people who are taking the survey, understanding the current plan in the commission, or what perspectives they bring into it.
It might also be as simple as doing some type of posting at the yard.
Right.
At people, what are things that you would want to have happen in the harbor? Right.
Absolutely. I mean, we really need ideas, and then people who could follow up with once we get the information back. I mean, Jack and I did a presentation to the RTM last fall that was a subset of this, and we had a very, very friendly reception. People were very interested. I mean, people felt that it was that they learned something. So I don't think we've got much headwind here, but we simply have to follow up in a responsible way.
Hey, Molly, how are you? Good. Give me a hug.
Are there other surveys out there that maybe we could all get emailed or something so we can kind of look through it and see what kind of questions are on it, and then maybe everybody can give their input as to what they believe the important pieces of each survey is?
We can do that.
And then maybe we can just quickly put our own survey together like that simply, just
right,
group.
Right.
Oh,
we can do that.
Good for you.
That would be great.
We can do that. We can do that. If everybody wants to participate, that would be fabulous.
I know I'm going to be a lot better at reading something and saying, yes, that's important. No, that's not, than I am looking at you and trying to give you an idea.
No. I get it, and I think again, Jeff is the major domo on this. He's gonna keep us kind of all in line and give us direction. So it's not like we have to suddenly come up with a 60-page plan. I mean,
I think if we're all responsible for being a part of it, but you have a few key people you can reach out to that's important to you, I think we can all.
Okay.
It's important to all of us to put our input in, I would imagine, correct?
Sure. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, your name is on the back, going to be part of it. And if you've got an interest, this would be the time to get involved and give a hand. That's great. Why don't we can do that. We can do that.
I think this plan is going to come before all of us again, so to the extent that we were all part of deciding what's going to be in here, it's a much easier review process when we're done.
Yeah.
We all had a part in doing it in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So much work has been done for us already. It's kind of a nice.
We didn't bring them tonight, but we made copies of the plan for new members. But for some reason, the Granville print shop has not been open. I don't know why the last few days, but the plans are sitting there to pick up. So I can get those. I can maybe bring them to the Sullivan Hall.
You're talking about this plan?
No.
The actual harbor management plan document.
Oh, got it. The document itself.
The document with the policies and the recommendations. So it's a fairly thick document. But I should have assuming that Frank is going to be opening his shop next week, and I'll have the copies for everyone next week.
Okay, great.
So it's not later this week.
Great.
We should give folks the rules and procedures also.
Right.
Because on a day-to-day basis for the harbor master and the mooring committee, for example, we deal with that almost more than we do with the plan itself.
Yeah, and you can go to the website now. The plan is on the website
right.
if you want to look at it, and so are the rules and procedures. So you can email that right away.
Great. Anything else? Any other ideas, suggestions on the plan update? Great. Okay. Pequot Yacht Club application to DEEP for certificate of permission for mooring floats. Jeff, we know.
I contacted the engineer for the yacht club, and he told me today he's heard nothing back from the DEEP.
They have 90 days from June 15th, I believe, so they
can issue it right away, in fact. After 90 days, the DEEP has to make a decision one way or the other, but they can approve it much sooner.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, last item under old business. No swimming signs for Lower Wharf. Eric was going to look into that, and Sam put a few signs up. Neither of them are either of you, Sam or Eric, here on the phone? No. Ted, did you want to? Ted Schwartzman?
I'm here, Kim.
Do you have any input for the no swimming signs for Lower Wharf?
Well, I've been trading emails with you and Cheryl for a couple days now, and Cheryl, for the new members of the commission, Cheryl Peacock is a former commissioner who was very helpful to the commission for a number of years, and spends a portion of several days down at Ye Olde Yacht Yard in that Lower Wharf area. Reading books and just enjoying the harbor. And she's been observing the kids jumping off of Lower Wharf on a regular basis. It seems to be somewhat independent of what time she's there or what time the tides are rolling in and out. Usually between mid-tide and high tide, but not necessarily. And she has reported to us that the guards have been calling the police on a more regular basis, and the police are showing up some of the time. The Marine police are showing up as well and starting to take more interest in this. But we did observe that signs did go up on the bridge between Southport and Westport on Pequot Avenue as you go over to Beachside. And those signs are pretty official looking. I'm not sure where they came from or who put them up. Perhaps the DPW did. But they're permanent signs, metal, look somewhat reflective, attached to a metal pole. And they seem to be doing the trick. As from what I hear, there haven't been as many kids jumping off that bridge. So there has been some discussion as to whether we may want to try to put up some permanent signs in both the Lower Wharf area as well as the Old Yacht Yard area. Because there's also been kids jumping off the rocks at the Old Yacht Yard into the harbor as well. And so that's really the point of discussion that I was hoping we would have, Kim, is some discussion whether we want to put up some what I would call more permanent signs of a metal variety, since the ones that Sam put up of a temporary variety were basically taken down within 24 hours. Now, with that said, I think the process that you would go through if you're really trying to dot every I and cross every T is that there's probably other groups that we would need to confer with, the Historic District Commission, things of that nature. But the thought was if we were to do all that, we would miss the rest of the season. So perhaps we put up signs and then we loop back and try to have those discussions later on and perhaps after the swimming season has ended.
Yeah, Ted, I would agree with you. I think this is a public safety issue, and I think that the town needs to, it's in the town code already that there's no swimming. So it's really on us to enforce it. The kids would say they don't know that because there's no sign. So I think we need to put up a sign with Public Works putting up something that looks stable on a metal pole like they did for the bridge, and then simultaneously we can work to get something that's more appealing from a cosmetic standpoint. But I think that it's just plain dangerous. And even the other 2 days ago, I was sailing or motoring in, and there were kids that were swimming in the harbor again, right off the pilings over there. It's not safe, and somebody's going to get hurt, and we've already got it in the code as something that's not allowed. So I feel like something temporary that's not going to get removed is urgent, needs to be done.
It looks like all.
Yeah, and Jack, I think what's changed this year compared to previous years, where you may have had an occasional kid jumping off or swimming, is this has now become a very regular occurrence in the harbor, where it's happening multiple times each day. And you're not talking about one or two kids at a time. There may be one or two kids at a time, but basically Cheryl has told Kim and me that you're talking of upwards of 10 or more kids at any one time.
Yeah, there were 6 as I was coming in.
How are they getting there? Are they driving a car and parking it? I mean, do we have them pulling in past that gate?
These are not 16-year-olds. These are 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds.
I'll just talk to this. One of them, I think we have to remember it's a COVID environment, because kids are going to be kids, and whether it's posted or not, it's no different than skateboarding or other things, but I was seeing it happening more with kids, for example, in June when they may have otherwise been in school or other things. So I think it's hard to understand the magnitude of it. I would offer this. I don't know enough about it. I don't think it's up to us to enforce it, because this isn't an enforcement thing. It's up to us to probably post the town ordinance to make sure. So I just want to clarify the belief on there, because
And those were my emails to Officer Wiltsey, that he said that they will have to have a presence there.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, there's no sign.
Definitely an increased presence from Marine Police. I've also seen, for whatever it's worth, what I think is a decreased presence of swimmers. So I was posting the code if the code is the code. Kids being kids. I do have a question, though. I mean, no swimming being no swimming, does this include the dogs on the other side of the lower wharf?
No swimming.
No swimming. It should.
And also people were coming across from the golf course, so they're coming across the channel from the golf course.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because those dogs haven't stopped. I mean, they're always there.
But, I mean, you could as easily hit a dog in a boat as you could hit a kid in a boat. You've got no breaks.
Right.
Harry, you were going to say?
The kids are swimming across from the country club of Fairfield.
Well, so it's whatever's going to get posted is going to have to get posted on both sides.
Well, and maybe we should be writing a letter to the country club and just say, you've got lifeguards down there. Yeah. Could you please?
They could enforce it from their side. Yeah.
We could have DPW possibly put one or two signs on the side of Country Club Fairfield, right near the wall. The kids are going to have to walk by it to get down to the beach to swim across, and put maybe 2 signs on the lower wharf.
Well, I think Lower Wharf and Yee Yacht Yard, the kids are jumping off there, and the head of Parks and Rec told me that if we had signs, he would be happy to get them up down there as well. So I think the only question is, how do we get the signs?
Right. I mean, it's a question for Public Works.
DPW.
Right. I mean, it's already in. It's I under whatever that section is there. It's already in the code. So it's just a matter of Public Works creating a sign to enforce the town code that's been in place. I agree. It hasn't been a problem until this year. I don't remember any other year where I saw this kind of volume. And I'm sure it's related to a combination of heat and pandemic.
No sports.
Yeah.
Nothing happening to these children.
It's pathetic. It's just not safe. Right.
What I love seeing, what I think COVID has done, which is so promising, is they've brought childhood back to when I was a child, where you actually played and ran around, and you didn't have to have all this club and activity. You made your own fun. Well, this might not be a great way to make fun.
And that's why, as I said, I think there's a distinction between posting the code and enforcing it, and it's the enforcement
Well, but when I see these kids from the yacht club who are learning how to sail, have kids come hurtling off the wharf into the kids trying to learn how to sail.
Upside down.
You know, I mean,
That's an accident waiting to happen.
that's,
But I think it's true. It's important that they can't be stopped, or nothing can be enforced by the enforcement people if we don't have a sign there.
right.
In a sense, correct?
I don't think it's fair to the kids. I mean,
I don't think they can really do anything.
Well, it's in the code. I think they probably can tell them it's not allowed, but I think that's not fair. I think you need to post it.
And for the other signs to disappear within 24 hours?
Right.
Yeah.
Very smart children they are.
Yeah.
Signs, what
Somebody's got a great bedroom
Yeah.
with some good signs hanging on the wall.
Ted, do you have any interest in calling DPW?
What I'll do, Kim, let me reach out to Jennifer Carpenter first.
Oh,
And
that's a good idea.
And see if she might have an idea as to who put up the signs on that bridge between Southport and Westport. And Jennifer is very good and very helpful. If she doesn't know who may have done that, I think she'd be able to find out. And then once we find out, I will give them a call.
Great idea. Great idea.
The one thing I would like to talk about is where the commission thinks we should have signs and how many signs, so that I can be specific with them. I think we really have three different areas that you have an issue. One is jumping from the wharf at Lower Wharf itself. Another one, which is really, really scary based on Cheryl's pictures, are the kids are running off the green at Lower Wharf and diving into the water at mid-tide, where there's probably not much more than 3 or 4 feet of water there. I mean, it's very, very dangerous. And then kids are also jumping off the rocks at the old yacht yard. So I think we actually need to have signs in 3 different places. And I think I heard one of the commissioners just mention we should probably try to put up a sign or 2 on the country club side too, perhaps somewhere on that sandbar.
Right.
So are we talking about 4 different places where we would want to have signs?
Or 5, yeah.
We've got a lot of nodding heads, Ted.
Okay. So let me talk with Jennifer Carpenter and see if we could figure out who the person is we need to contact to get the signs made and put the signs up.
Great.
Ted, I agree with you. If there's pushback because of the cosmetics of these signs, they may not be the most beautiful signs, we can have that conversation with whoever wants to have that.
Right.
Right. And they can be fixed during a season where it's not going to happen.
Right.
But until then,
they
Well,
use most
it may
important.
also, I think it's hard to say now how many signs. I mean, if there's 1 sign posted at Lower Wharf, 1 in the yacht yard, and 1 there, it might, we're not going to turn it into a billboard and obstruct it.
Right. No.
Right.
No.
So
No.
I'm not sure that we need 3 signs in Lower Wharf. Lower Wharf's fairly small, and there's only 1 way in.
Well, why don't I do this? Why don't I reach out and try to reach the right people, and then I'll also fill Kim in on my conversations, and between us we'll try to make some sort of determination on where to put the signs and how many signs.
Great. A lot of agreement here, Ted. Thank you.
Sure.
Any new business?
We're going to talk about rules and procedures committee.
So our plan update committee, Doug, Mark, Kim, Jack, Libby and Harry want to be on the committee, or just want to take a look at the...
I'd rather not be on the committee. I'd rather just help or be a voice. I mean, I'll be a voice, but I'm not sure how much help you get.
Okay.
I'm here, so yes. I mean, don't worry about it. I'm here.
Okay. And I think I've already asked Jack and Ed Billings to take a look at the rules and the procedures and report back to the larger committee on updates on the rules and procedures. And Jack has asked Pat Carroll, our former harbor master, if he wouldn't please advise that the 2 of them. And I'm thrilled that Pat, who has been a loyal listener since the virus began, I'm delighted that he's going to be involved because he's got a lot of experience and good insight. and I'm sure we can all learn from him. So, okay. Any other business? Any new business? Okay, then we adjourn. Mark moves to adjourn. Jack seconds it.
All in favor?
All in favor. We're out of here.
Where's the air conditioner?
Until August. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jeff Stedman, especially for
Yeah, that was great.
your presentation.
That's an excellent
That
presentation.
really
That helped me a lot.
good.
I learned
Really sets the stage. Thank you all for calling in.
So I see what was available.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Jim.